Hi, everybody. It's Marcus Collins.
Hey, and I'm Corinne Shipper from MA Properties Real Estate, and welcome to tonight's Buyer's Masterclass. Marcus is going to start out, and then I'm going to take over. So sit back, relax, grab a glass of wine, and I'll help you enjoy yourself this evening. And if you're watching it recorded, have a cup of coffee. Sure. Okay, Marcus.
So, first of all, thank you for joining. We should say a hello to Leighton, who is a follower of our channel. It just happens that it's Leighton's birthday today, so we just wanted to take a few seconds, if you're watching live anyway, Leighton, to say happy birthday. But with that, let's carry on with the seminar. So, let's get going. So, smart strategies to succeed in today's competitive housing market. Smart moves made here. Kind of what our idea here is that buying and selling a home is really way too important to leave to chance. And so we've crafted this seminar, this masterclass, to take you through all of the different steps for buying a home. So this evening, we're going to take you through the smart way to buy a home, smart decisions, the process of buying a home, how you go about the buying process itself, search. That's a kind of big one. There's more to that than just looking at homes on Zillow, clearly. And then how do you craft that successful offer? Crafting an offer is easy enough, but a successful offer is the key one. And then we'll just touch upon what's going on with COVID. Clearly, we're still in the middle of it. A lot has changed from what we saw last year, but we thought we'd cover a little bit about what's different this year than perhaps what you've seen in previous years. So let me kick off with smart decisions and talk to a little bit about information, about data. It's easy to get data today, but getting that kind of information, getting the analysis of it is the hard thing. So that's what we're about doing today. And we look at our markets, and tonight I'm going to talk around the Arlington market, but I'll be broader as well. I'll focus a little bit on that because that's a key market for first-time home buyers who perhaps don't know the process. So I'll focus a little bit on the Arlington market, but it will be applicable to a wider set of markets than just that. So what are the characteristics of the housing market and what's the impact of COVID? So there's a much broader discussion to have around the real estate housing market. And every year we produce 2 market reviews. We do one for Arlington, we do one for Lexington. I'm in the middle of finalizing that right now. So if you have interest in what's going on in the more detail than we'll give you right now, reach out to us so we can get a copy of that, either electronically to you or a paper copy as well. We print lots of copies of that. So Arlington and Lexington market reviews, if those are 2 markets that you're interested in. If not, if there are other markets you're interested in, reach out to us too. We have all of those questions too. But let's just take a look at what happened in the Arlington market in 2020. Strange year, but looking at the data, this is the median house prices, you really wouldn't think so. It looked like it performed relatively well in that year. In terms of home sales, so the average, or the median, I should say, is running at about 870,000. Talk a little bit more about the condo market, which is a sizable increase in what we've seen in previous years, 3 to 5% higher than we've seen in previous years. So it's almost as if COVID didn't occur. And we saw this also in the single-family sales, around about the same number of sales in 2020 that we saw in 19 and 18. Some of the reason for that is the difficulty of people selling their home. Because when you sell a home, you have to move somewhere else. And it's a very competitive market, and so it's tough to sell because it's tough to buy, if you like. So buy comes first. How do I buy? And it's really tough to buy. Therefore, I'll stay put. Interest rates were also very low in 2020 and will continue into 2021. And that meant a lot of homeowners, existing homeowners, thought about refinancing as opposed to selling. So I can refinance my mortgage, reduce my payments, and perhaps stay in the house I'm in. So roughly static home sales in the Arlington market. This happens to be the Arlington market. In other towns, it was different. In Lexington, for example, we saw about 25% more sales in 2020 2020 versus 2019. Now, remembering Arlington house prices is a little bit higher. It's about almost double what we have in Arlington. That gives home owners, soon to be home buyers, if they look downsize, an easier task to buy. So we did see some movement in some other towns, but in terms of Arlington, static differs from all of the different towns that are out there. In terms of the effect of COVID, you can actually see it in this graph. So this is a graph that plots cumulative sales, 2019 versus 2020. So the red line is 2019, the blue line is 2020. As you can see, by end of year, they were at about parity. There's almost no difference in the number of homes that actually sold in Arlington in 2020. But if you look at this area, if you can see my mouse here, the curve flattened in that second half of March, April, and early May. And that was COVID. So this period here where you see the curve flattening was COVID. Very few homes coming on the market. Once we got to that early May time period, so the number of homes coming on and therefore the number of homes selling rose quite rapidly. And by the end of the year, we'd reached parity with what we were in 2019. So, as I say, with the exception of that short-term blip, if you will, very similar characteristics to what we saw in 2019. The key metric we always look at is the sell price to list price ratio, because it gives us a feel for buyer confidence. How confident are buyers to buy in the town and perhaps pay over asking? So a ratio of 100% means comes on the market for 700,000, sells for 700,000. So 102% here, buyers have got confidence in the town that they'll pay over the asking price. So that's a good sign. It's been a slight reduction from where we saw in 17 and 18, but still a ratio over 100% shows that it's very much a strong town. And unfortunately for buyers, something of a seller's market. Buyers do have to compete, hence the topic of the Masterclass, how to succeed in a tough housing market. Condominiums look very similar in terms of prices, just a little bit lower in terms of the shape of this graph. The average condo is about $665, so a little bit cheaper than single family. In terms of the number of sales, it does vary somewhat, as you can see, just the normal ebb and flow of the market. We saw slightly more condominiums in 2020 than 2019, and you can see that in the cumulative graph again. If you notice the March, April, May timeframe, there was almost no difference in the shape of the curves. It slowed, but only slightly. It really kicked in a little bit later, that slowing down. But by July, the number of home sales in 2020 had surpassed 2019, and off it went. And as you can see, a lot more condominiums came on the market at the end of the year and sold at the end of the year. Interestingly, that fall period here where there were a lot of condos coming on and selling, a somewhat weaker condo market, quite localized just at this time period between September, October. By the time we got to the end of the year, the market had picked up, but for those condos that came on the market and those people that bought in that kind of September, October timeframe, what you would have seen is there wasn't quite as much competition as you'd seen previously, because there was kind of the bolus of condos coming on the market. Sell price to list price ratio a little bit lower than single family, down at 101. One of the reasons for this is we saw some reluctance, not that much as you can see, the sales were higher, but some reluctance for buyers to buy into a condo just because of that shared space. Somewhat nervous about sharing a space, a dwelling, if you will, with somebody else. So there was a little bit of nervousness, and that's some of the reason why we saw that ratio dip down from 102 to 101%, but not a big deal in the ground plan of things. A lot lower than 27 and 2018, as you can see. So, what's the kind of the 2020 summary, if you like? Similar number of sellers in the market, but a lot more buyers, that's for sure. So in 2019, we had a somewhat softening sellers market. That shifted because of that large number of buyers in the market, and it went very much back to a seller's market, hence the idea of the masterclass, how to succeed in a competitive environment. Positive price appreciation, so buying a home is still a good prospect, of course. And as I mentioned before, the condo market, just that little bit upset, if you will, by COVID and shared spaces. So that did had something of an effect on that, which is worth pointing out. So, a lot going on clearly, not quite as much as last year, but still a lot. The pandemic, the recession clearly hasn't worked its way through the system quite yet. New administration, we'll see when back to normal. Perhaps it'll be the summer, perhaps it'll be the autumn. I do think, though, realistically, there is a kind of light at the end of the tunnel. And overall, the housing market in most of Massachusetts fared very well, and certainly did in those towns that are close in to Boston. Not sure about 2021. It's kind of early, but I think some things are clear. There is the difficulty of sellers finding the next home, and so there's this pent-up demand for sellers to move, but it's difficult for them to move. So my prediction is that we'll see static number of sales 2021 versus 2020, just because of that difficulty. There are definitely a lot more buyers in the market, and so it is very much going to be a seller's market. It's not going to shift away from that seller's market, that's for sure. So relatively stable in terms of sellers, a lot more buyers in the market. We're certainly seeing that now. Here we are in January without really very much snow, and we are seeing competitive offers or multiple offers, competitive situation with many of the home sales that are coming on the market at those reasonable price points. The good thing is interest rates are very low, and they look to remain low throughout 2021, so that's a good thing. So I still think 2021 is going to be a tough market for buyers, because there just isn't going to be enough inventory to satisfy their needs, their requirements. So that's kind of the big picture, so still a tough market for buyers. Good picture for sellers, except, of course, they have to buy something else. So that's the 2020 predictions. Early days, so we'll see quite how it plays out, but I think that's what we'll see moving forward. So, enough of the data. A lot more data on our website. If you have any questions, please do reach out to us. There's a lot more detail there. We can talk you through a lot more graphs and a lot more channels as well. But with that, why don't I hand over to Corinne, who's been sat there patiently, where she can take you through the SMART process and how, guess what, if you know the process, information is power.
Exactly. And I just want to circle back around, Marcus. You mentioned that we have different towns in our database, and just wanted to let the buyers know we have about 50 towns in our database where you can see all the different types of graphs that Marcus was talking about, and then some. So it's really helpful, and we'll go into that a little bit more as we continue. So let's see. So smart search. Is that what this one is?
This is smart process.
Smart process. Okay, let's talk process first. So the question that you need to ask yourself when you're looking is, what am I looking for? And it's really tempting to surf around. There's so much information. You can spend so much time. But when you ultimately get to your search, you're trying to distill it down to the things that are most important. And typically, for most buyers, the things that they're considering are the commute, the school system, and the affordability. And so with the commute, for some people, it's not an issue. Some people are using public transportation. Clearly now a lot of people are working from home, and so that's coming into the mix, and there are questions about how long and how that will affect the workplace in general. So that's changing up the market a little bit. Mm-hmm. In terms of schools, some people have kids in the school system, and that's a huge drive, looking for the towns and weighing cost versus the school system. And then the third one, of course, is affordability. And affordability is really how much home do you get for your money? And that's a no-brainer. You all get it. But those are kind of the three. So if you're here and you're starting to really think about these three things, these are the things you should write down: commute, school, and affordability. And you're playing with those, okay?
I think you raised a good point there about before we would have, I don't know how we would have weighted those, but probably equal to some extent. But maybe there's that shift away from commute moving forward. It's hard to know, I think. I wish we kind of could see that. And perhaps, I'm not as worried about the commute, but I really would quite like a larger home because I'm going to be working from home. So I think it's kind of not exactly a work in progress, but it'll be different for different people in terms of what their what that right mix is, and that's definitely shifting as we can kind of move forward. So needs versus wants.
What is it that you need versus what you want? So again, looking at the commute time, how long do you actually want to sit in the car? You want to make sure you're looking at it at peak traffic hours, so you're not making a bad choice there. The schools, and then the in terms of the home, you can kind of come with size, but a lot of it is really how the home functions. So how many bedrooms do you really need? How many bathrooms do you need? Do you need garage? Is that really important to you? What about dedicated workspace? So outline what those key things are, and then there are the things that maybe are a little more negotiable, and put those on your list. Maybe you want a hot tub or something like that. Put that on the list and we'll see what we can do for you. But really, when you're in the search, those bare bone needs are what you're putting your criteria around in your search, and working with that. And then the other thing that's really important is to include all the important decision makers from the beginning. So, if you're a couple, it's nice to have both partners involved, not bringing someone in at the last moment where they're catching up on what's happening in the market. For people who aren't really clued in, sometimes it's a little bit shocking to see what the prices are these days. And so if you have family members who are maybe contributing to the purchase and they're kind of wanting to see the house before you pull the trigger on it, it's really helpful to have them be aware of what's happening in the market. We don't want them to come on at the last minute and question everything that you've spent months trying to figure out.
Right. And then the all-important budget.
Yeah, so the budget's really important. So the one thing, if you're not too far into your search, and you may not have heard of this yet, but if you have, you definitely have heard the word around, is getting your pre-approval. And so what that is going to your bank, choosing a lender. There are all different kinds of lenders, but basically going to them and having them look at all your financials. And so the pre-approval is stronger than a pre-qualification. With the pre-approval, they're really crunching numbers. They're asking you for real paperwork. And they're going to give you, in the end, a letter that will tell the highest price that you are qualified to buy and what percentage down payment you're putting. And this is really important because when you're a seller, you want to not just see who's paying the highest amount of money, you also want to understand the risk associated with each buyer. And so the stronger you as a buyer are, the better that is for you when you're submitting offers. The other thing to know is that the pre-approval, it sometimes is a little bit higher than you may want to spend. It's not exactly like a credit card limit, but you really do need to look at what your monthly payments are and figure out what you're comfortable with. There's a term called house poor, and what you don't want to do is put everything into your house and where you didn't calculate other costs like maintenance and taxes, home insurance, all of those kind of things. If you really haven't been careful about that, you can get over your head, and then it sort of shrinks the other parts of your house, and you are just kind of at home in your nice big house, but you're not eating out at all or doing any of these fun things. So make sure you're careful about that, especially when you go out there. If you see a really great home, it is tempting to put an offer in that's higher than your budget. So you really need to stick to that. And then just to know, the pre-approval letter is something that signals what what kind of mortgage you can get, but really you don't need to commit to the person who gives you the pre-approval. It's really just a service that banks do to try to get to know you. It's a free service. Once you have your accepted offer, you have a time period in which you can shop around for a mortgage and look for the best rate. So so that's basically that. And then considering costs of owning versus renting, there are definitely costs to owning, transaction costs with selling when you move again, and just the cost of closing that you don't want to be buying and selling so often. And so the common wisdom is, if you're buying a home, ideally you want to be in place at least for 5 years so that you're for the transaction costs and things like that. So if you're not totally settled on where you want to be, maybe it might be a better option to stay with renting.
True. And so what exactly is that buyer's agent? What do they do? We're talking about buyer's agents. What is the role of the buyer's agent?
Yeah, so the buyer's agent works solely for you. And so in a transaction, there's the seller, obviously, and then there's the buyer's agent. The seller's agent, which I'm going to go into next, they're actually just working for the seller. So you, as a buyer, you're entitled to have a buyer's agent. It's someone who's an agent who knows your local market. They're able to evaluate the properties. They listen to what you want. They coach you. They negotiate on your behalf. They do searches for you. They look at comps so you can determine, what a home is worth and what kind of offer you need to put together. So they're doing all of these kind of things. They're leading you through the transaction once your offer is accepted to make sure you're on pace with things. They're connecting you up with resources. It could be, contractors. It could be your attorney, your lender, all of these things. And, you're entitled to have a buyer's agent. And just so you know, you don't pay for it. The seller is actually paying whether you have a buyer's agent or not. So it's really behooves you to get one on, and you don't actually need to be at that point where you're ready to buy a house. We actually find it's better to engage with the buyer's agent way beforehand so that you can sort of anticipate things and move a little more like streamlined instead of just sort of jumping right into that first offer and calling your agent then and picking an agent then.
Right. And I guess that juxtaposition of that, what about the listing agent? Should I use the listing agent is a question we get quite often.
Yeah, we do get that question a lot, and people think that it's beneficial to work through the listing agent because they think that somehow that's going to give them an advantage, and they think maybe that the seller will choose their offer because they will have a lower commission or something like that. But what you need to know is that the seller is signing a contract long before their home comes on the offer, and that determines what the percentages are that are being paid to the agents. And so whether you use the buyer's agent or not, the seller is going to be paying for it. The other thing to know is that the seller's agent is working for the seller. They're really they have a fiduciary responsibility to get them the best terms, and the best price and that kind of thing. And so when you walk in, you don't know them and you think you're having an advantage, but in fact, they are beholden to the seller. And now they're saying they're going to represent you. And how can they represent both sides? That's a conflict of interest. And the other thing is they don't have a relationship with you, so they're not able to really help you understand the house based on what it is that you set out to find. And so there's really not that experience and trust working with the listing agent.
And so, the two together makes that kind of buyer
dynamic duo.
Indeed.
So, this is a really big purchase for a lot of people. This is their first time buying a home. You're talking a totally different scale than anything you've ever done before. Just to go into it blind, most people do not work in the real estate sector. We do as agents, and we understand a lot about the process. We have great experience working with other buyers and sellers, and so having us on your side it's basically a no-brainer. And so you want to get that buyer's agents in place. And so if you have a great agent, they'll be able to help you read the market. Once you find a home or help you find a home, they'll be able to evaluate the home, not just in terms of what it's worth, but also what is the quality of the home, walking through, pointing out things that perhaps you may not notice. The buyer's agent negotiates on your behalf. They work through all the contracts and help you line up the home inspection, and then kind of process the home inspection and then negotiate on that. And so the buyer's agent is really helpful working with you. And obviously you're the bigger part of the equation, but we are here to help you achieve your goals, basically.
Indeed. So how do I stay? Because when I was talking about the smart decisions, everything's around a very competitive market. So I guess one thing that we need to think about here is about this whole process. It's not just about understanding the process. It's the role of the buyer's agent to make sure you stay one step ahead of the competitors, because there will be on almost all good houses, and we'll talk more about the good ones and bad ones in a minute, but there will inevitably be competition, right? So, what is it that today's buyers want?
Yeah, and so what I see and what we generally see is they're sort of those homes that have been upgraded, clean. They're basically move-in ready homes is kind of how we think about it. When you walk in the home, you're like, wow, I can see myself living here. You don't have to do much. It's so easy. It's so tempting. And those are the homes that most buyers respond to and therefore put offers in on. And so those are kind of the hot homes. And then there are the homes that are more a fixer-upper, and you all know what that is. And today's buyers, when they're buying a fixer-upper, they're obviously expecting it to be discounted. And so, you're looking at two ends of the spectrum, really, and how you negotiate those and how you find them and choose them. It is very different.
So, number one, good houses.
The great houses. So especially in Arlington and in the towns in the area here, it's a very competitive situation for any homes that are move-in ready and that kind of have the good flow, or they have something about it that's sort of special and just invites buyers to imagine themselves living them there. And so don't be afraid of the competition. The key is to make sure that you understand how to excel in the competition. Make sure you're choosing the proper field, so to speak. So bidding wars happen. The experience of your agent is going to help you figure out where you're going to position yourself to get a home like that. And it's very doable. You just need to be precise. There's so many elements to an offer, and when you really, with a lot of analysis and looking at all these components and making sure you're tipping all of them to the top, you can be that person 1 in 10 who gets the offer. You just have to do the right thing. And it's not just money. People think it's just money, and that's just one component. It's a very important component, but it's certainly not the only component of the offer.
So what about number 2?
So this one is recognize potential where others may not. So this is the fixer-upper, and these are kind of fun and stressful in a different way. I think, in a housing market where it's a seller's market, it's inherently stressful for buyers to either look for a home where there's a lot of competition or to look for like a fixer-upper and try to figure out what is the cost associated with repairing it. But when you're looking for a fixer-upper, what you want to do, you're looking for similar qualities. You're looking for, a place that has a great location. The flow of the rooms is really important. It's incredibly expensive to be moving walls and electricity and plumbing and things like that. So you need to get some key things right about the home. Amenities are important. Are you near, shops and things that are valuable to you, transportation, things like that. And then just generally, what is the price for the space? And so to do this kind of thing, a lot of times you have to have an imagination. And so you're going to have to look past clutter. You're going to look at decor that's outdated. You're going to have to be looking at fixtures and imagining how you could replace certain things. And there's a whole range from like light rehab to, more intense rehab. And the cosmetic ones where you're just painting and doing wallpaper and things like that, we're going to go into that a little bit just to give you a sense of what we're talking about, so that when you walk into a home like that, you'll be able to maybe recognize what the potential of some of these places are.
So, picture speaks 1,000 words, is that what they say? Why don't we just show you some pictures?
There's a good idea. All right, there's a nice one. So wallpaper. People really get nervous about taking wallpaper down, and they think it's exorbitantly expensive. It's not as expensive as you would think. Better to get a great house and have someone come in and do it for you if you can't do it yourself. And you might save a lot of money on a home. I had someone who bought a home. It was a fixer-upper up in Swampscott, and it was really remarkable when you looked at what they got the home for, and it was sort of an estate sale kind of home, and there was nothing wrong with the home. It just had some outdated fixtures, and the bones of the home were so good, and they replaced the windows, and then they did the painting and removing the wallpaper and the sanding of the floors, and they increased their equity by so much more than the money that they put into the home. And that was a very exciting thing because they were first-time home buyers, and they'd worked so hard to get that down payment, and then just with 3 months of sort of patience and getting it done, they made so much money. It was really exciting.
And here's an example. I mean, if I go back, the reason I didn't show the other one is that I imagine people looking at this going, ooh, I don't know what that could look like. Actually, that's what it can look like. I mean, very easy. Very easy. Here's another example, this time of a kitchen.
And so, these kitchens that are quote unquote outdated with the wooden cabinets and such, painting cabinets can be done. It's so much cheaper than obviously putting in the new cabinets. And when you're buying a home, a lot of the times this is good for the long term. Sometimes you're moving into a home that is a home you're imagining living in for 20, 30 years, and the kitchen isn't updated, but the home is so great and the location is wonderful. And by painting the cabinets, you're good. This kitchen is good for a while. And then in 5, 10 years, when you have the money to upgrade the kitchen, then you can do the kitchen of your dreams. But, you can clean these things up. When you have the white cabinets, when they have white appliances, the white paint job, on the cabinets, really just, the whole thing blends. It looks really nice.
Yep. Here's another example of a house that we did. Same thing. Those cabinets, those old oak cabinets, and then lo and behold, that's the new kitchen. And I think you're right when you're saying, that this will tide you over for 3 to 5 years, which is perfect. You're going to find yourself in a competitive situation. You might be paying a little bit more than you anticipate, perhaps a little more than you want, but guess what? Just some paint on the kitchen, and lo and behold, that will get you going for the next 3 years or more before you do that perhaps that more major update moving forward. So that's one way to think of it. Yeah.
Even like in this picture, if you can go back for a second, Mark, sorry about that. If you look at this one, the floor in this was an old linoleum. Just putting linoleum floors down, they're actually not so expensive. And if you're talking about a 5 or 7 year kitchen, just to get to that point, just to update that, even just that sense of clean is really, really nice. This kitchen, I'd actually seen this and I had never seen the before, and I was shocked when I saw the before.
Right. Bathrooms too. Here's an example of bathrooms.
Yeah, and the thing I think that's surprising about bathrooms, and we're still always kind of shocked about this, but you can paint the tile. And so if you're a professional painter, they come in and they use some kind of bonding agent. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's really quite durable, and they paint the tiles. So you can take, those bathrooms that are blue or pink or whatever color they are, and you can cover up the tiles with the white. You're just going neutral, and then you can add your personality and the details when you move in. So that's a great way to go in the bathrooms. And even like the worst laminate cabinet, it's not actually marble, that's faux laminate. Faux marble laminate. Right. Yeah. Just painting that white. Even the countertops, we painted those before, and that works out nicely. We recognize this is not, you probably want a new bathroom, but this is a great way to go as a stopgap. Especially if you're at this point where you want to get into town because you have kids who start going to school, and you realize that, you'd rather put a premium on the neighborhood and the school than, whether the bathroom's updated.
Right. Paint.
So fresh paint makes everything seem clean. This is a classic example of, you walk in, it's hard to imagine it, and when you neutralize the whole thing, it just looks bigger, it's clean. And I think the other thing about a paint job, it's not just color. When the painters, if you're using a professional painter, the quality of a professional paint job is just amazing. They come in and they fill every little gap. The walls become completely smooth. It's so beautiful. It feels like almost like new construction. It's nice. It's really nice.
Smells like new construction too.
But you're not paying for new construction.
Exactly, you're not paying. Remember, this is strategy 2, which is the house that less people want because it's a fixer-upper. I mean, that's the reason we go through all of these details, is that less people want these homes. They're potentially easier to buy, and then you just need to use that little bit of imagination as well as your buyer agent to advise you, oh, you can do this, you can do that, and actually do these changes. Here's another example, a more expensive house this time, but same with paint. Guess what? It's just they've literally painted, in this case, the bathroom cabinets. And you can see the difference that actually makes, which is the color that people want today versus what it was previously. I like the next one because it's the outside. Because
yeah,
you look at
this
this
is remarkable,
drab,
actually.
right? Yeah.
Right, Marcus, this was a house that someone else had listed. This is one of our listings, actually, and someone else had listed it, and it had been under multiple agents, had never sold, and they eventually brought our company in, and we recommended doing a few things to the exterior, not at great cost, but really just painting the trim, the doors, and removing the old shrubs around the door, just so you could see the architectural detail. And what a difference. And then it sold. I think, I can't remember the statistics, but it sold with multiple offers. It was one of those.
Yep. And
same house.
And it had literally been on the market for well over 12 months before and not selling. And it's just that little difference. Here's another great example. I remember this house because those shrubs made it so dark in the house that all the windows were just covered in these shrubs. Remove the trees, open up the house, and then lo and behold, there it is there. You can see the difference. And actually, you can't really see it there, but there was a second entrance somewhere here. So you couldn't even see that second entrance. But now when you've removed all of those trees, it made the house much lighter inside, but also made it much more photogenic. And this one again didn't sell previously, sold multiple offers after we'd done this landscaping work. So that's strategy 2, and as I mentioned, that's the reason we show you these before and afters, just to kind of spark your imagination, if you will. When you go into a home and you look at it and you go, oh, I'm not really sure, I want a new kitchen, I want this, I'd like white cabinets. Much of that's relatively easy to do. It really isn't that difficult. So that's why we wanted to show you those before and afters, to give you a sense of that. But if you do want to go for strategy 1, that's where you have to compete. That's the key difference. So how do I set about searching for a home here? What's the process?
So in this order, your life will be a lot easier. That's what we call best practices. So get a professional working with you, regardless of when you're ready to go. Start out early, getting that set up. Once you're at that point, then you're going to determine and really what are your wood likes and what price point are you at. You're going to get the pre-approval so that you have so it's real, basically. It's like this is a reality check. This is your budget. And then you're going to start narrowing it down. So you're going to try to, some people are, hell-bent on one town. Other people aren't really sure. For some people, that's a huge part of what we're doing as buyer agents. For other people, they know they want to be in, let's say, Arlington. And then we're just looking in one specific town. Then you start researching that town, look at, the homes that are on the market, attend open houses. We can also show you homes that have sold in the last year, so you can get a sense of the housing stock and the size and the price and that kind of stuff if you feel like spending the time doing that. Whatever it is that you have a good feel for the town. And then, next slide, please. Then once you're at that point, we're going to set you up, and we can do this pretty quickly, set you up with an MLS search so that you can see the home. So let me first tell you what MLS is. So MLS is the database that real estate agents put the listings for the home in, and it's only accessible to the agents. We can go in, we can search it. We have a huge database. It goes back, like 30, 40 years, Marcus? So it's pretty, the pictures probably go back 20 years. It's really interesting to see a home, how many times it's changed hands, and be able to go back and look at the pictures. But just to say that database is what all the websites that you are working on, that's where they get their information. And so when you go into Zillow or Redfin or whatever, you can go onto our website. We also have a search feature as well. All that information is being pulled from this master database. And so as agents, we can set you up with a search, and we can get very specific, or we can go broader and set that search up for you. And we can choose when you get that. You can get it daily. There's all these different things that we talk about how you would like to get your listings. And then you're starting to get into the cycle. So let's just say, since we're talking about Arlington, like a lot of the towns around it, have a cycle that happens pretty much every week. And it's I think it's kind of geared around the open houses. So homes typically come on the market like Wednesday or Thursday. And then on Saturday and Sunday, typically in COVID, that's a little different, but typically there would be an open house on each of the days on the weekend, and then offers might be due on Monday or Tuesday. And that's sort of in the popular price ranges where you're going to see lots of buyers' interest. And so that cycle is something that we watch really closely with you when we're working with you, because one thing you want to do is you want to see the homes as soon as possible so that you have room to think about the home, evaluate it, figure out what your offer strategy is, and we'll go a little bit further into that later. But there are all these things that help you put in a strong offer, and one of those is making sure you see the homes as soon as you can, so that just so it's not such a pressured situation, and so that we have time to really think about how to put a strong offer in.
And when I'm looking at this, I think with COVID, I would add another bullet point to this one, which is the use of Zoom to talk not only through what's going on in the market, but also each individual house. I know that many of the agents in the team will have a Zoom call before you even go out to look at a home, just looking through those homes. Do you find that useful?
It's enormously useful. So yeah, that's what I'm doing with my buyers. We're looking maybe Thursday night to see what's on the market. We circle back around on Friday too, but we basically look at all the homes that they're interested in together. And I'm pointing things out. And it's, there are things that I see when I'm looking at a listing that one of my buyers may not see. And so just by eliminating, if there's maybe 6 or 8 or 10 houses that they like, if you can get maybe a third of them, you're going to quickly see things about them that quickly they basically disqualify them. And so now you don't have to spend the time going to see them. And so that's enormously helpful. And then the other thing I find from week to week is we're actually talking about the homes. And so in such a different level that I feel like I'm through this whole COVID process, I feel like I understand what my buyers are looking for. In a different way, because I'm listening to them process, like, oh, I like this, or the questions they're asking, you're looking at it before you even get there. Yep. And so the questions that are coming up are sort of defining what their biggest, concerns are. So that's kind of interesting process.
Yeah, and we'll definitely continue. So yeah, I think Zoom, or I guess everybody uses Zooms. That's certainly been a positive. Certainly when I was talking through, say, homes with buyers, you do get that kind of sense of, all right, you like that, you don't like this. Whereas it would have been much more difficult to get that previously, I think, which is key.
And I think in the past, people would maybe go to open houses more, and then maybe I'd go with them on Sunday if there was a home that they really liked or something like that. Sometimes I would go out with them. It just depended on what was going on that weekend. But I feel like now we're doing more online, and then we're actually going out together because we're sort of avoiding the open houses, which sometimes can have lines, and they're not as relaxing to look at a listing. So I'd rather go out with my buyers and go with them and see the homes together. And that's just really informative. It's a great part of the process, I think. Right. And also when you're going out with your buyers, you can point things out about the construction that they may not know. And so, if you look at enough houses together, it doesn't take that long before they start looking for like watermarks in the basement or, things it may not occur to them.
Yep. Cool. So one, just to get back to the data for a moment, there's a lot of data on our website, and one which we found quite useful to bring towns into your search or eliminate towns from a search is the sales distribution. And what this shows you is how many homes sold in which price point. In of itself, it kind of gives you a sense of this. I think this is the Arlington data for last year, actually for 2019, not 2020. You can see that if you've got 6 or 7, perhaps 800,000 to spend, you've got a lot of homes in your search. A lot of homes that are candidate homes in your search. So that's useful. If I juxtaposition that with Lexington, the next town out, you can see that those price points, that at those lower price points, very few homes coming on the market in Lexington. So if you're a buyer in that 7-8, Lexington, add it to your search, but you probably need to add as well Arlington into that search. Conversely, if you've got 1.5 to 2 to spend, Arlington, only 10 homes sold in 2019, whereas if you go to Lexington, that 1.5 to 2, there you have over 60 homes coming on the market. So it's a way for you to quickly bring a town in, exclude a town, however you want to do. There are more statistics out there that the buyer's agents will talk you through, and this is, I think, one of the values of Zoom, is you can go through these, do this kind of comparison between, okay, that's Arlington, yes, Lexington, I can see the difference. That really does give you a sense of, okay, which towns should I be looking at? Which towns should I just add them to the list? Sure, if something comes up, great, but realistically, chances of me buying in that town are somewhat lower. So lots of statistics out there that the buyer's agents in the team will show you, and Corinne can show you those for, say, all those 50 towns that we have. And it's quite a useful tool to make that kind of, okay, which town should I look at? So now I've figured out what I'm looking for. I've worked out that my buyer agent is great, and I'm really looking forward to going through this. And guess what? I found the home I want. Guess what? Now I've got to write that offer when it gets serious, right? So what is the offer process? How does that actually work? Having gone through this whole process, how does that offer process work?
So your offer is accepted, and the whole process of writing up the offer is another whole thing. That's sort of something that each agent kind of keeps secretive. We're not trying to be here on a public forum telling us how we craft the strongest offers. So when you work with us, that's something we spend more time on. But let's go over the offer process once you've actually gotten your offer accepted. So typically when your offer is accepted, you need to put in an initial deposit. It's called an earnest deposit, and it's typically $1,000. And that goes to your final purchase. Then typically there's a period in which you have your inspection. You have an inspection contingency because you want to buy the house after you've checked it out. So that's typically like a 5 or 10 day span in which you'll have your inspection, and then you'll get your inspection report, and then we'll reach out with a response, and we'll tell them what we found. So the inspection, typically on a home that would say like an Arlington size home, they're typically about $600. But when you get into the bigger homes that are maybe like 6,000 square feet in Lexington, those are going to be more like $1,000 for an inspection. So there's that cost. And the beauty of the inspection is that if you find something that is a problem and you really have a problem with it, you can negotiate with the seller to try to have them fix it. And hopefully you come to an agreement. If for some reason you don't come to an agreement, you can get out of the agreement, you can get out of the contract, and you get your deposit back. And that's the protection afforded by the inspection contingency. So that's the inspection part. And once the buyer and the seller have agreed to what's going to be done with the property and the price and all these terms, then that is codified in the purchase and sale agreement, which is also known as the P&S. We all say the P&S. And so after the inspection is agreed upon, the lawyers will draft that up. So you'll have a lawyer, the seller will have a lawyer, and they'll create this contract that everybody is going to sign. And at that point, you need to put down 5% of your purchase price minus that deposit. And you're going to have an attorney, and the attorney typically, if you're having financing, will do the P&S, and they will do the closing and working with the lender and all of that. And the attorney cost, it depends who the attorney is, but typically it's like $500 to $1,500 for that attorney cost.
So that's key. So in order to buy a home, if you will, you need to have in the bank, as part of that process, that normally 5%, upwards of 5%. So that's kind of a key fact to draw from this one, is that, as you get to that purchase and sale, and as Corinne outlined, the dates here, probably anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks after the offer, I guess, that 5% will be due. So moving forward.
So now you've signed the P&S, and so that spells out the agreement, and you're going to put your application in for your mortgage the next day. And you have to do it the next day because of your mortgage contingency, which is coming up. So let's go back to the mortgage application. You're going to put it in with the lender or a bank, and that's the day after the P&S. And then typically it's about 4 weeks before your mortgage contingency date. And the mortgage contingency says that if for some reason you don't get your financing, even though you had the pre-approval and everything, you are entitled to exit the agreement and you get your money back. If you get your financing, you can't back out. But you can if you're denied the financing. And so that mortgage contingency date is a concrete date where the bank says, okay, you are cleared to close. They've checked everything out for real. They've done, and we'll go into what actually is with that, but the closing costs. And then closing is typically about 14 days later. It can be a week to 2 weeks later. Mm-hmm. And at that point, the balance of the purchase price is due and the closing costs. And so your attorney spells all of those costs out.
So you've tracked out about 6 weeks, I guess, there from accepted offer through to getting the keys at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Right. So the inspection, that's always fraught with some difficulties. Certainly we found that this is the point at which buyers get very nervous. Sellers get nervous too, but buyers get very nervous. But there are some ways to kind of work through that one, I think, and it's worthwhile outlining what some of the strategies are around that inspection, because it is such a fraught time for both buyers and sellers, for that matter.
So traditionally, in a balanced market, a buyer would be requesting an inspection. You would not buy anything with this kind of a price tag without making sure it's good. And typically in this area, most of the housing stock is used. And new construction, as you saw on the last slide, that also has problems. So you do want to have an inspection and make sure the house checks out. So when you request an inspection, the seller is the one who's absorbing the risk. And what that means is you basically have nothing to lose. Maybe you have the cost of the inspection, maybe a little lost time, but you're going to get all your money back aside from that inspection. In that case, the seller is the one who's absorbing the risk, because if you change your mind because of something that comes up in the inspection, now they have to go back on market. And you as a buyer know when you go into a house and it's either been on the market for a long time or you see that it's back on market, the first thing you are thinking is, why is it back on the market? There must be something wrong with the home. And so it's really a smite on the home. And so sellers are paranoid about having their home come back on the market and just losing market value. They're just going to make less money typically when they're coming back on market. For sellers, they get that first shot. So they really are evaluating all the offers when they come in. So people who are putting in the inspection, they're absorbing the risk there. Now, you've probably heard in markets like a competitive market, like say in Arlington, or, a lot of the towns right now with COVID, we're seeing multiple offers. So in that kind of situation, you're probably hearing like, oh, some of the buyers are waiving the inspection so that they get their offer accepted. And the reason why they're doing that is the sellers love this, because now they're just going right to the purchase and sale agreement. They don't have to worry about negotiating, or if there's something that comes up that the buyer is going to be unreasonable about. And they also, basically a buyer who has an inspection and has cold feet, there might actually not be something wrong with the house, but there might be, you can pretty much always come up with some reason to back out of the agreement and say, we found something in the inspection, and they can't really counter it. And so then they're back on market again. So the waiving of the inspection is so powerful when you're putting in an offer. Now, I do not advise anybody ever waive an inspection without having an inspection beforehand. Some people think that that's a waste of money. I think in a competitive market, if you really want a great house and you keep finding yourself attracted to those really hot houses, doing an inspection for $600 a house is going to shortcut your process, and you're going to probably get your offer accepted much sooner, so that if you're paying for 1 or 2 or 3 inspections, I try to think of that as a transaction cost, because actually it's putting you to the top of the pile of the offers. So the other thing for some people who don't want to do that is you can increase the deductible on your inspection. And, to be fair, there are homes that sell in the area here that aren't that competitive. If they've been on the market past their deadline, we know that they don't have lines of sellers out the door. Now, you can request an inspection, or maybe it's a situation where, you don't want to waive the inspection because you see that there are some problems and you don't feel like you have the funds to actually do the work. So doing the inspection is really important to you. So what you might do is you might request an inspection where you say, I'm willing to cover the first, for example, $10,000 worth of items that come up. Meaning, I know I'll cover like smaller things, but if there's a bigger problem, if there's structural issues or something significant, you don't want to get clocked with that. And so you're essentially doing this kind of half thing. They still have the risk that you could exit, but it's much lower.
Right. So yeah, you're right. You always see these stories where they waive the inspection, but as you mentioned in the second one, they're doing that pre-inspection, maybe even just looking at some of the more expensive things in the house, structure, the heating system, the roof. That's a way to maybe not quite eliminate, but certainly reduce the risk involved with waiving that inspection, which, as you said, puts you to the top of the pile in many cases, which is good. I know we put a home under, today we listed a home in Westboro, and no surprise, the offer that won that waived the inspection, but had done a pre-inspection too. So it's certainly that waiving the inspection with a pre-inspection It's certainly a winning strategy that we use, that the buyer's agents on the team use quite often. So inspections out of the way. What about the money? Well, how do I do that one?
Financing. So
Right.
you're getting a mortgage. You are partners with the bank or the lender. They are owning oftentimes 80% of the home. You're putting your 20% down. And so they have a great stake in the house, and they will really look carefully to make sure that you're buying a home that they want to, quote unquote, invest in. And so there are a couple of things, a couple of terms that come up over and over, and I'm just going to go through them so that you understand them. So one is the loan to value ratio, and this is how much you're borrowing compared to the sale price of the home. So it could be 80%, sometimes it's 90%, sometimes we see 97%. A really strong buyer might have a mortgage and they're putting down, 40%. First-time home buyers don't always have that kind of down payment, especially in a market as expensive as the Boston area. But obviously, the higher the down payment you have, the stronger your offer is. And so sellers are looking at your offers, and they're looking to see that you are low risk. And so the higher the down payment, the lower the risk to the bank. And so one of the reasons why they're looking for someone who's a strong buyer is because the way the bank determines how much they lend you is not on the purchase price. It's actually on the appraisal. And so the appraisal is an independent person. It's a professional who goes by and sees the home, and they're determining what the market value is. And they're independent. You really can't challenge them when it comes in low, but it does sometimes come in low. So if you're getting 80% financing and the appraisal comes in really low, you're now not getting the 80% you thought you were getting much less money. And so you're going to need to make up that difference. And so if you're tight on cash, you may not be able to make up that difference. Maybe you might go for, a 15% down and change the parameters, or maybe you might try to negotiate with the sellers. There are different things you can do. But one thing that happens is if you get rejected for the mortgage that you said you were going to get, say 20% down, you have an option to exit, because your mortgage contingency protects you from the appraisal coming in too low, because it is kind of out of your control. And so that's one of the issues with the appraisal. And so when we're in a competitive environment and you're seeing like 15 offers, you can bet that's going really high over asking. And a lot of times it's going over what, most of us think makes sense, but it's kind of where the market's at. And the home, for some specific reason, is speaking to the buyers. And so it's just going high. And so, so you just need to be aware of that as a buyer and say, okay, what's my break point? So we can add in, sometimes the sellers, when they know it's going much higher than it probably will appraise, they're actually looking to see if the buyers are including an appraisal clause in their offer that says that they can cover a difference from where it appraises to where the purchase price is. And so that's a really strong offer in that kind of situation. And then another thing is, once you get your offer approved, you really need to stay put. Do not change your job. Do not sell assets. Do not purchase large items. You really want to just be in a holding pattern for those 6 weeks, because your pre-approval was based on your formula. And when you change the formula, you really can screw things up. So don't tamper with your credit score by doing crazy things. Right, Marcus?
That's right. Don't go buy that Ferrari. I know you want it, but wait till you've moved in. Then you can buy the Ferrari, not before.
Yes.
That's for sure.
We'll Definitely get the garage for that buyer, won't we?
Right. Closing costs we hear a lot about as well. I mean, how do you actually calculate them?
Yeah. So closing costs. So your attorney and your lender put all of this together in the end, but typically your closing costs are including the cost of getting your loan. So the origination fee from the bank or from the lender. Also, there are things that they need to do. They need to pay for the appraisal. They're going to have a survey. And then if you're not putting 20% down, they're going to ask you to take out a primary mortgage insurance, which is a PMI ballpark. I'm just going to throw out a number like $100 a month or something like that. You can add on until you get to that 20% that you own 20%. And then homeowners insurance, typically you're paying, what is it, like a year in advance or something. Title insurance, the title, they're doing a title search, but sometimes the bank wants to have title insurance. A stamp tax is a form of sales tax. And then there are things that are in the house that you're buying that you get to pay for. So if there's an oil tank, they're not giving you the oil in the tank. You get to buy it, and that comes in your closing costs. And same thing for HOA fees. If you're in a condo, taxes, anything that they have paid, you're going to pay the portion, you're going to cover the portion that you're using once you move in, if they've covered it in advance. So those are closing costs, and it's sort of a ballpark number I've heard, and it can vary a lot depending on where you are in the quarter or where you are in the oil tank. All these different things add up. But typically what I've heard is a 1% to 1.5% of the value of the home is kind of what you should be thinking about.
Right.
So if you're buying like a $700,000 house, think maybe 10K, something like that. And this is really just a throw it out number, so you have a ballpark. You know, it's not 30,000. You know, it's not 1,000. So
Right.
think loosely when I say that number.
Right. But there are a number of calculators, like there are mortgage calculators online. There are a number of closing cost calculators, which gives you a ballpark figure. Which is, you know, exactly what Corinne gave you there, just to give you a sense of what this number is. You know, it varies. It's certainly somebody who's coming from a different state. It could be totally different in different states, but it'll give you that kind of ballpark figure. So Massachusetts is an attorney state, so you need a lawyer. In fact, you need multiple lawyers from what I've read before.
Yeah. So you are going to have two lawyers, one from the bank or for the bank and one for the buyer. And typically we always have one attorney do all of that together. It's nice to have that one person do it. It makes more sense. And on top of it, just by bundling it, you're saving money. So we have real estate attorneys that we like to recommend. It's a huge part of the transaction. That's usually where you see messes happening. And so it's nice to have someone who's a real professional. They do need to be a Massachusetts attorney, and they do need to specialize in real estate. Of course, if you have someone you love, that's fine. We find when we're trying to help manage the transaction from behind the scenes, when it's someone that we work with all the time, it seems to go really smoothly. When it's someone we don't know, it's really hard to kind of read the situation because their pacing is different and they do things differently. So, of course, you can choose your own attorney, but we do have fantastic attorneys that we love working with.
The other one I fallen foul of before is lack of communication from some of those other attorneys too. You know, you feel like you want to be involved. The buyer is asking you. You're relying on the attorney to give you that information, and so the communication is a key one too. And that's why having an attorney that either you've worked with before or we recommend is key to move this forward. Sometimes attorneys that we've never worked with before, it can be a somewhat fraught time because time is of the essence. You need to keep this thing moving quickly, and there's nothing worse than not being able to get information from the attorney. So, but you do need an attorney, that's for sure. So, what about buying during COVID? So, what's different, and how has your job changed last year versus 2019, I guess, is really the question. And how does that impact today's buyers?
Yeah. So I'm just doing a quick read to see what's on this particular slide. So, you know, it's all about safety first. That's everything. But people still need to see the home. And so what we're trying to do is be selective about which homes you're going into. So we're trying to front load a lot of the search online. Some of the homes have 3D tours. They have virtual open houses. They have a lot of ways you can see the home. And so the more time you can spend looking at it that way and deciding which homes are the ones you want to visit is better. Once you're there, you're wearing masks. You know, it's upticking again. I know when we were at the height of COVID last spring, we were wearing gloves and booties. You know, there's sort of different ideas as time goes on. People are using sanitizer. But generally the idea is that you only have one party in the house at a time. If it's a larger house, sometimes they'll pace it, you know. But so what we're trying to do for our team is we found that private showings are the best way to go. And the reason why is there's no stress when you go in the house. There's no one you're bumping into. You're not under time pressure. You have your allotted time. And so that's how we're changing the actual showings. In terms of how it's changed the market in general is just there seems to be a greater motivation to move. It seems like there are a lot of buyers who have situations with where they live that need to be changed because of COVID, because of people working at home, people going to school at home, like the kids being at home. And maybe the home was too small to start with, but now it's really obvious. And so we're seeing that kind of stuff. And then we're also seeing people buying in different areas. It used to be that the premium was being closer to the city if that was where your job is. But now, where people are working from home all days, or maybe in the long term, 3 days a week, that commute has changed, and the importance of how long the commute is has changed because it might be less days a week or not at all. And so people seem to be wanting to go further out. And it's also cheaper and you're getting more space. And it seems like with the restaurants closed and all the amenities just like tempered down, it seems like people who were thinking about moving to the burbs at some point, they're all kind of doing it sooner, maybe. So that's the hustle around the COVID.
I think that's true as well. I mean, you had a situation, and one of the other agents on the team had a situation where the seller was moving not just to the burbs, but to the Berkshires.
Yeah.
Really moving out, and we had another one moving up to Maine. So people are looking at, do I really need to be where I am today? Do I need that commute exactly as you say? Maybe I can go further out. That's a key. But maybe not. We don't have data for the Berkshires, but we do have the information for most of the towns in the area. Doing that search up front with these restricted showings, doing as much of that work up front online, really is going to save you a huge amount of time, because once you go further out, the distance between houses becomes much more, and so it's going to take you much longer to do that. And so there's a lot of things to think about. It's not just turning up at an open house and just going in and having a look at the home. Turning up at an open house today, we've seen situations where there is literally a queue around the corner. As Corinne mentioned, it's much preferred to have a private showing, because then you're in the home, you feel much safer. You can have perhaps not as much long as you would like, but certainly some quality time to have a look at the home. That's kind of key.
Yeah, just to say, I just want to continue on the open house concept. The open house thing is really hard. So for sellers, they really want to have their home seen as much as possible. And so, common logic before was really to have these open houses. And when we're having listings, it's hard because we want to also give people a chance to come in and see the home that don't necessarily have an agent, and just want to see the house, I guess. Or maybe they just want to do that. The challenge with it is you can't anticipate how big the crowd is going to be. And so, if you have an open house and too many people show up and you're the person who's the listing agent, you feel terrible when there's people waiting in line and they're all kind of like, frustrated because they want to get in. You have to pace people and you have to explain to them, please respect other people's space. This is really important. All these protocols are in place. And so with the open houses, we've sort of stopped doing them. Sometimes we do them on a Sunday afternoon and we post them late on Saturday, for people who might want to go to them. But really, it's just so much better to see a home in the private showing. And, basically what sellers know is that people who are the serious buyers, they've actually been looking. And so most of them do have the agents and they can get into the private showings. And so that's why not all the homes are having the open houses.
Right. Inspections, a little bit more restrictive. I think it's open. This was in 2020. Hopefully now, as it becomes a little clearer, what we can and cannot do, this will begin to open up. Because this always worried me that when, for example, buyers weren't allowed to go to an inspection with an inspector. There's a lot of nuance that goes along with going to an inspection. You find out just listening to the inspector, there's a lot going on, just explaining how things work. And it did worry me that if buyers weren't allowed to go with the inspector, they would lose a lot. But this is changing for the good. It is changing,
and it really depends on the inspector. Just like in your life, that you have friends who are, very concerned about COVID and they're living very small lives, and other people are just sort of out there and they're doing what they think is safe. People seem to have different interpretations of what safe is, and so same thing for the inspectors. Some of them are really stringent, and some of them for a while really put their business on hold because of health risks. And so it really just depends on the inspector. And we're trying to be safe. We're definitely wearing the masks. We're keeping the distance when we're in the house. So it seems to have worked so far. I really haven't heard anything in the real estate sector where people were getting COVID from houses.
Yeah.
No, haven't heard anything. I'm sure it's happened, but not common.
Financing is kind of interesting because this too is something which was a bit of a transient. What we found, Corinne talked before about appraisals. how the amount of money that the bank will lend you is based not on the offer price but on the appraisal price, and that's clearly a key concept, as Corinne mentioned. But with more appraisals, where the appraisal was just driving by, wasn't actually going into the home, there was that potential for lower appraisals, and we saw a few of those last year, which was rare for us. We've seen very few low appraisals in prior years, but I know you had one last year.
Yeah, that was such a bummer. It was really a problem. And, we tried to challenge it, and we went through the comps, and, it's very hard. They have a process, and you basically, we couldn't turn it over. It just stayed the same, and they had to, you know, really bend over backwards to make it work because they wanted that home. They didn't want to exit the agreement. So
right. So it's important to remember that appraisal, it can come in low. Did last year. My hope is that as appraisals become more normal, if that's the right way to put it, then drive-bys will be less of a thing, and so the potential for low appraisals will diminish. What we also saw last year was slow loan processing, because not only were there lots of buyers out, there were also lots of people refinancing with low rates. And so it was quite common to cut close to the closing date, even have closing dates delayed last year. Time will tell whether that changes this year, I'm not sure, but there's some flexibility there is perhaps in order, certainly in the early part of 2021, as we understand whether we're going to have the same problems we had in 2020 with slower loan processing, so with lots of people financing, as well as lots of buyers in the market. Almost there, and virtual home buying. So as we mentioned, it kind of recaps what we've said all along, really. Zoom is your friend. All the agents working on Zoom to give you that kind of virtual consultation. Get used to looking at everything digitally, deciding whether you are going to view a home based on what digital assets that were out there. Everything's electronic. Some showing restrictions, as we mentioned, and also e-recording at the registry. So there was thought at the beginning of 2020 it would be somewhat problematic, but I think now we're into 2021. We've kind of ironed out all the issues, and you can expect this to move even more with seamlessly almost than it did in 2020. So that's a good thing. And finally, so if you can take us home, Corinne, our commitment to you, the buyers.
Exactly. So to recap, because this is what we've been talking about the entire time. Our commitment to you, when we work with you as a buyer's agent, we work really closely with you to educate you. And our philosophy really is educate. We're not trying to sell you on anything. We're really trying to help you understand the market so that you can make wise choices and also not spend tons of time. We're trying to shortcut the process a little bit for you. We're there to guide you with your financing. We help you find great homes that fit your needs, and we evaluate those properties. For you, we arrange showings and evaluate the properties on site, meaning what is the actual home when you're there, and then we evaluate the property, comparing it to comps, so that when you're putting in an offer, you really have a sense of where that home fits in the market and what kind of offers you can reasonably expect to see. And then figuring out where you fall in that, and do you want to try to get that particular house. So strategizing on the offer, we negotiate on your behalf. Once you have your offer accepted, we're there for the inspection. We're there with you. We're reading through the inspection report. We're translating that. We're following up with different contractors if you need to, look through any of that kind of stuff. And then we're just coordinating all the activities through closing, hooking you up with the attorney, helping you, introducing you to lenders if you need it. If you want to go in for visits before you close, we're helping you with vendors who might come in and give you quotes on painting so that the day you close, they can start. There's a lot of things that we do that are beyond just you buying it. It's also trying to help you settle into your home. So if you need resources with like moving companies or whatever it is that you need, we're here to help you with that. And really we're doing that, trying to give you exceptional service, and we are really doing it from our heart. We work ethically. We are on your side. We're not trying to make you buy something that you don't want. It's really trying to understand what it is you want and be there to help you achieve it. So that's kind of our commitment to you.
So with that, thank you for joining us. Thank you from Marcus. Thank you from Corinne as well. If you have any questions, please reach out to anybody on the team. Corinne as I say, she talked you through this whole process. So if you have, say, any questions about anything we talked about, about the market, the process, how do I set up the search, we're here to answer all of your questions. So with that, I'll say thank you.
And I'll say thank you. So feel free to reach out if you need any help at all. We are here for you. And thanks, Marcus, for all those stats. Thank you very much. Okay. Have a good night. And bye. Bye.